So, welcome to the RecWired podcast. Here we're lucky to have the guest Jonathan Abraham from Bullhorn. We've invited Jonathan to talk about the recently released grid report. Thanks for coming on, Jonathan.
Thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure, obviously, being on. I run my own podcast, so I sort of jumped at the opportunity to do this, and happy to be here.
Brilliant. If you want to invite me on to talk about what's your podcast?
It's called The Alpha Tales. So it's the name and what the content is about is sort of like juxtaposed. So people probably expect really sort of like manly podcast, but it's a lot more deep layered in terms of the conversations we have.
Nice. Okay. So, you'll be an easy expert on this one then. So that's good. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're at Bullhorn. What's your role there?
So I'm currently in the account executive role within the field team. So that is sort of like the mid-market across UK and I. I've been at Bullhorn just over 6 years now. So 6 years in September. Just over 6 years. I've sort of gone through from like an entry level role and then sort of gone through every step you could go through to get to the stage I am today. So started as a BDR, and then my last year in the BDR sort of focused on SDR activities, then went into inside sales as an account executive. So that's sort of managing the SMB space, whereas, dealing with mainly like startup businesses or 1 to 10 user space. And then now I'm in sort of that mid-market space.
Cool. You must have seen lots of changes there in 6 years.
Yeah, definitely. Biggest change is just obviously the landscape of recruitment in the whole, but also like the tech. Like I remember like my first time at Bullhorn, all people was really talking about was ATS, CRM. Now people talk about automation, AI, analytics, all sorts. So that's probably the biggest change I've seen.
It's interesting, actually. The recruitment industry changes, but it doesn't change sometimes. So in the grid report, what's quite interesting was you maybe could have done some of that stuff 6 years ago, talked about how people were doing things, where people invested, and they'd probably be. I think although it changes sometimes, I think the fundamentals still remain the same. But you've knocked up a few slides for us to have a look at the grid report, and there's some really interesting things that came out of it. So it won't be death by PowerPoint, but if you want to share your screen and show us a few things, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Let's jump into the first slide, where we're sort of just setting the scene for what I call like the new norm for the industry. And the reason, there we go, you should be able to see that.
Yep. It doesn't work for those listening to the podcast, so we'll need to talk it through.
Yeah, we need to do some sort of like, I don't know, posts to highlight these. But essentially, this just highlights sort of the new norm, especially since like the COVID period, because even though COVID is maybe 4 years away from us now, it's still sort of that big, incident that happened and sort of shook the whole recruitment industry, and also allowed business leaders and people within the industry to recognize that, okay, cool, we need to be future proof, we need to be tech proof, we need to make sure that if something like this happens again, us as a business, we're not redundant in terms of what we can do. We're protected with the people we have and also the tech we have. But with the grid report, it focuses a lot more around, from a candidate's perspective, what their expectations are working with agencies. And I think it's really interesting because, again, in over 6 years, I've spoken to how many recruitment businesses. And if you ask how many of you actually collect feedback from your candidates or, send out surveys or, after process surveys to your candidates, that it's not as high as you'd expect. So I think the grid report was really good to sort of shine that light on what our candidates actually expecting from a recruitment agency in today's world.
And they're definitely demanding more.
Absolutely. They're demanding more because I think they're used to more. They're used to, in their everyday life, especially when we're talking about tech, they're used to, them getting auto suggestions from, what shopping they should do, or, Amazon reminders, ASOS reminders. So it's only when they maybe work with recruitment agencies, sometimes there's like that drop off of, a bit old fashioned, a bit like, come and see us in person, email us your CV, and, we'll get back to you in X amount of time. And there's sometimes lacking that engagement.
Fair enough. So this is very much a new norm, and you talk about those sort of human-centric approaches and strategic use of automation, and
Mm.
increasingly AI to the challenges. And I think you're right about COVID. I think it was a real wake-up call for people. I think people who were sat on digital transformations for years turned them around, and it's not just in recruitment. You think of the things that did come out, like being able to order at your table in pubs and things like that. There was actually some really good things that came out. Probably
Yeah.
be really great to keep them as well. So.
Yeah, I remember they had the QR codes at tables, and you go to like restaurants. You don't need to go to the till. Now you can order, before you left the house, and then go and sit right at the table.
Fantastic. Yeah, very good stuff. So that's the new norm.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think it'll be good to sort of get into one of the expectations around a candidate's perspective is the speed of communication. So one, again, we know that I think we're slowly coming out of a candidate poor market where there weren't enough candidates for everyone to go to. So speed was really essential. And if you haven't got technology helping you getting out to the right candidates within the right time frame, then as a business, you're just sort of leaving money on the table. You're missing out. You might have those candidates on your books, but if you can't speak to them quick enough, then you essentially might not, you might as well not have them. And then also the type of communications as well. So at what point is a candidate actually hearing from you, right? And when do they actually want to hear from you? So one of the stats that I picked out here is 8% of candidates expect to be placed within 20 days. So that means within 20 days, they want to have, had their details collected, had their pre-screens done, had their interviews done. Obviously, this is role dependent. So if maybe it's like an executive search role,
Yeah.
the process is obviously, longer, but they want to go through the process as smoothly as possible and as quickly as possible to obviously get that placement. And I've sort of related it to a few things. One, technology. Like I think with I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the TikTok format of like just swiping up on like 30-second videos. I can't tell you any other platform. I've literally saw one on LinkedIn recently and nearly got lost in the swiping up on LinkedIn. Like attention span naturally is just getting shorter for us.
Yeah.
So, we have that expectation of, I need to get to the end result as quick as possible.
No, I get that. Look, but going back to the previous point, 25 years ago when I joined the industry, I was told time kills deals. So I think that cycle has continued. But I think what's really interesting is, previously candidates had, they're actually quite, an agency's going to do this for me, an agency's going to do that. Now it's not it's not that they're impressed. They actually have the expectation that that's the minimum standard. And actually, if you think about it, 20 days, if you've been in a career and a job for like years, 20 days is a short turnaround.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So
But I think,
that's quite that's a great stat.
yeah.
And actually, I think if people are looking at this grid report and taking things into their business, at least chiming with expectations from candidates, even if they don't deliver, but realizing that they are the expectations and managing, as we always talk about, managing those expectations is really powerful.
He's also good at setting that sort of benchmark of what should we, be aiming for, especially startup businesses as recruitment businesses. A lot of the time, if they, you might have a consultant who's been at a certain agency for, let's say, 10 years, 5 years, they only have that expectation of that agency that they left, and then they sort of mimic that agency on a startup scale. But if you're aware of stats like this, you can set like an industry benchmark for yourself and then aim for that and then start to make your adjustments as well. So
I think the other thing to do is as well that people should be measuring this as well. So I'm not sure how many firms have this as one of their KPIs, So For people that we do register, how quickly do we get them? And it's not just the end results. How quickly do we get them into process? How quickly do we screen? How quickly do we get them, into send outs? How quickly do we get them interviews? So actually that sort of pace and the measurement of that is a really good indicator of how good your business is and how good your processes are.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another vital point is the health of your data as well, which can critically affect the speed of, you doing things, especially like recruitment process related to things. If let's say I spoke to a customer recently and they have about 70,000 candidates on your database, but their still first point of call is to go to like a job board because they can't trust the data that they have, or they can't trust that the candidates on the database have up-to-date information. So again, things like that can also add to the time it takes for candidates to go through a process.
100%.
Brilliant. I think it'd be good to look at the next point that I picked up was, again, touching on the first slide, is sort of understanding the balance between hands-on operate versus what to automate. So the reason I sort of said that is, again, with the expectations of candidates, they do want things to be progressing quite quickly. They also do want things to be as easy as possible to complete. So if there's certain tasks that they need to complete during a recruitment process, they want that process to be as smooth as possible. However, they still want that balance of human touch element. So they still want to speak and hear directly from a consultant, or at least if they don't, they want the communication that's coming out to be as personalized as possible. And we can see some stats here in terms of the frequency of when candidates would like to be contacted, like on average. So on average, 57% of candidates would prefer a recruiter to reach out at least once a week.
What's interesting for me as well, in life outside of recruitment as well, I think we've got very used to doing everything electronically, e-com, and just things. And actually in the last month, I've actually done 2 e-com transactions where I've gone on a website, or I've gone on, I've transacted. And the next day, humans phoned me and just said, thank you for the business. How was the experience? And it's like it's almost gone full cycle, but actually those companies really stood out for me in terms of, well, it's I didn't feel then just like a number, I felt like a customer. And actually for me that was really powerful from the brand. And they, I think probably has some, the high volume, I guess, of the people going on the websites and then browsing, putting stuff into the basket, not doing it, and then but the ones that matter then are those customers who go through, make the purchase, and then you're like, next time, I'll more than happy go and purchase for those brands again because of the experience I had.
Yeah, and that's a really good example of when you get the balance right between how when to automate things and then when to include or involve that human element. So I think that was a really good example as well.
Okay. But that's really interesting because I think I've seen a lot of, when I was doing the innovation investment role in previous firm, we had a lot of people come and tell us that, actually people don't like speaking to recruiters. People would rather not, and they just want to engage in a pure digital platform. And this research tends to say otherwise, at least in the markets you've surveyed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, it's critical to get the balance right, because there will be a point where maybe a candidate, or let's even remove it from recruitment perspective, there'll be a point where you wanna be able to access human involvement on an easier scale. However, it's sort of like as of when it's required, if that makes sense. So, for example, my partner, she's battling some parking tickets at the moment, and she's going through the route of appealing it. However, the process to speak to someone, because for some reason we will probably all know why, they haven't made a process of appealing or sort of essentially requesting, as user friendly as possible. And she's finding the process of trying to speak to actual humans to understand the process quite difficult. So again, you've given an example of when you get the balance between human interaction and automation correct. This is also an example when you don't get it correct, because again, it can leave someone really frustrated. And if we link it to, recruitment wise or recruitment related situations, there would be times where a candidate wants to speak to their consultant who's managing through the process, or they might have questions that they want someone to walk them through. Again, just recognizing those situations and then making it as easy as possible for candidate to, reach out to you, or candidate to give feedback, etc. Again, that will just help you understand the balance that you need to create a bit more. The next one is around onboarding woes. Again, this is especially around the onboarding process of a candidate's recruitment journey. And I just want to read out the key insight here. It says onboarding remains a significant pain point, with manual processes and lack of preparation driving dissatisfaction. Efficient onboarding not only improves experience, but also increases the chances of redeployment. I'll give you a sort of real life scenario. So when I'm speaking to businesses like on a day-to-day basis, and I find out that they have a contracting desk, I'll quickly ask them, what does your contract redeployment process look like? And a lot of the time, the process they tell me, either silence, or the process they tell me is very manual. But because I've got them to actually talk about it and say out loud, it always strikes that, without me having to ever say anything most of the time, it always strikes that, oh, by me saying this out loud, there must be a better way of doing this. So it's like that sort of moment of realization that, improve, and again, just that sort of journey of a candidate. So specifically for contract and redeployment, some of the worst ways that to manage that I've heard is, we have a list of all of our contractors on the whiteboard, and every day we'll call them to see, where they are and if they're interested in redeployment. Or we would mark how the duration of their contract placement on the whiteboard, and then remember to update that every week.
Wow. Old school.
So imagine if someone forgets to update a candidate or a contractor who's come to the end of a placement in 15 days, and let's say 3 weeks go by.
The other thing that I had to do it on at scale. So we were reporting on I think approximately 10 to 11,000 runners. So one of the things that we actually built in was a whole into the systems was a whole will extend, won't extend. So we could actually predict the contract book. And actually, it's not just about getting those redeployments. It's about knowing where your business will be in 6 to 12 months as well.
Absolutely. And just using, again, those numbers, those statistics to create that trend for the business, right? So as you just rightly said, you can then start to think more ahead rather than only be concerned with now.
Yeah, no, 100%. So there's some quite interesting things in there. And actually, I guess these are things that can be easily fixed. So, recruiter didn't understand my objectives. That's just better questioning. Documentation submission was complicated. Forms were complicated. So, those are all things that can be fixed easily. What I actually suggest to my customers is go on your website and apply for a job. And how do you rate the process? What was your experience of doing that? And would you do it again? And how would you do it differently? And it's amazing to go through that as an exercise with founders, because they're actually, they often just assume, or I don't know, maybe they don't assume, but what they think the experience is and what it is often very different.
A question for you, I don't know if this is slightly off, changing the direction, but a question for you is, like, what do you find are the typical reasons they would give you after sort of either seeing that process, or if you ask them, why is the expectation you had not the reality your candidates are going through?
I think then what happens is a sort of, hands up in the air, and you blame the person who put the process in. But I've seen it as well with things like advertising. I'll go into a business. How many jobs you got? We've got 300 jobs. There's 45 on your website. So it's about, yeah, it's the classic for business owners. Inspect, don't expect.
Mhm.
Inspect your processes and systems. And if you were shopping at your shop, would you buy? And it's a really really good exercise to go through. But I think it's just an assumption that it's all fine and it all works. Or we did that a year ago, we did that 2 years ago, but standards expectations have really moved on since. I think the other thing as well is that when you have different tech stacks, you add tech and tech and tech, and do you take it away? Do you simplify it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you
And
asking the same things on the application and then doing the same thing on qualification, et cetera, rather than having that data sort of pass through?
yeah, absolutely. And then also just to pick out one of the things you said earlier on, if you actually look at all of the sort of areas where candidates are finding the most satisfaction, they're very easy to fix. Like a lot of it, you don't need to be a recruiter with 10 plus years of experience. You don't need to know the magic keyword or skill tag that's going to find you that specific candidate. These are just like a lot of the time just a process issue. And sometimes when I speak to business owners, they have that fear of changing certain processes because it has currently so much human involvement, and they want to sort of keep their consultants busy. Like if my consultants are sending out an email requesting documents to be sent, then I know they're doing their job. Or if my candidates have a list of 20 candidates to go through and book interviews, I want them to do that because I know that they're doing their job. So, and sometimes they're scared to make that change, which sometimes is what's a lot of times is what's holding the consultants back, because they're spending their time on all this busy work and they can't actually fulfill the role to the best of its ability.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think especially when it's a bit, the market's not as buoyant, people like to feel that they're doing something, like they're busy. And also as well in the back office operations as well, the very
Mhm.
people who can make this change are the very people who stand to suffer from making these changes as well. So it's a bit,
Yeah,
I think people are very nervous around making these changes in case it impacts their roles.
yeah,
In reality, what I tend to see is people's roles not impact. It allows them to do generally the value add stuff as well, actually speaking to more people, having those more human interactions rather than just doing a job that an automation process can do.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Why I've been trying to put my finger on this, and it's still obviously a process in regards to if we move elements or sort of hurdles from like price, or we haven't got the resources available. Why do you, if you agree with me, why do you feel businesses, if we make it specific to recruitment, are so scared of changing their technology?
I think there's a fear of the unknown, and I think there's a fear that you talked about it earlier. You come into this vicious cycle that they can't trust their systems because they can't trust their data, and they don't trust their data because they've not got their systems in place. So at some point, you really just have to break that. I mean, it's the equivalent of doing your order on Amazon and then having someone phone up and say, "Are you sure that's your address?" And you wouldn't see that in. I think recruitment can learn a lot from things like e-com and how people market B2C, B2B. But I think there's a fear that if you sort of let it, of letting go. Probably what I've seen.
Yeah, that hoarding mentality, whether that's hoarding processes or hoarding data. I have again, I speak to a lot of businesses, and a lot of time when we talk about, okay, you have 100,000 candidates in your database, but yeah, I want to bring every single one of them onto Bullhorn. I'm like, do you like, how many of them are you speaking to at the moment? Or maybe about 20,000. So why do you need to bring the other 80K? Like, so it's just that again, that probably that hoarder mentality of we want to, keep our processes the same, even if we get different technology. We want to keep the same candidates and keep acquiring more candidates, but we're not engaging them. We want to, keep working with the same client. So like, I don't know, but again, I can always just put it down to that fear of change, as you said.
A risk of going over an anecdote of 20 years ago, but I think it's still relevant. I went into a Huxley board meeting and asked for permission to delete half the database because it added no value. And every one of the directors in there were like, "Look, for the last 3 months, sales have been good. We've been up. We're growing, etc., etc. There's probably gold in them hills, and it feels like the data we've got is actually good enough. So fine." So I'm like, "Great, I'll restore them." And they're like, "Excuse me?" I'm like, "Yeah, I archived them 3 months ago, but sales are up. There's less clutter. People are making more effective calls. Do you want me to put them back?" And they're like, "No, no, you can just delete them, Andy." So I think you're right. It's that hoarding mentality of, it's there's value there. We can't get rid of that. It's almost like, yeah, we've paid for it. But if you're not going to use it, it becomes self-selecting. If you're not using it, it's not important enough. Therefore,
Yeah,
focus on those 20,000 records that are going to bring you value, and work on those harder than 80,000 a day. It's very much a diminishing returns.
absolutely. I agree. And also value, a lot of people don't realize this sometimes, but value has an expiry date. So you can have 100,000 records of candidates in your database, right? But if you was a candidate yourself and you registered for a role in 2018, and then the next time you heard back from an agency was 2020, you're most likely not going to respond unless they keep sort of make that effort to re-engage you. So you sort of, even if you get new candidates and acquire new candidates, you've got a small sort of time frame to build up that perception of your business, that relationship, and engaging them with the right and relevant content. Even if you end up placing them or not, you still, I think, have a responsibility to offer some sort of value
Yeah.
for them to be interested in maintaining a relationship or even remember who you are as a business, right? So there's no point bringing on hundreds and thousands of candidates if you haven't got the plan to continuously engage them. And as I said, like once you bring them on, the time is ticking for the interest in you to diminish.
Okay, then. Next finding. Let's move it on.
Let's go. Similar to the about two findings ago, but I picked this one up because it's more around, as I said, building that sort of loyalty across your candidates. In regards to what I just said, right? Value has an expiry date. What can you do to combat that? Right? What can you do to essentially have a pool of candidates that all know who you are? They like your content, they engage with your content. And the best way I've seen this happen is to approach it in the sense of building communities. Now, I know for a fact that recruitment businesses are linked or part of certain types of recruitment leaders communities, whether that's, certain group chats or certain LinkedIn community groups or Facebook groups. And I believe that they get some value from being part of these groups. So why don't you use the same mindset towards your candidates? Why do you think your candidates would also want to, walk this lone wolf path rather than being part of a community where they can start to network across each other, which only adds to the success of your brand as a business as well.
Yeah, and we see that in community. We saw that actually post-COVID. During COVID, actually, when we put our business together, it was originally the Lockdown Leadership Network, and it wasn't companies against each other. It was basically the industry against decimation. So, and since then, we're over 1,000 founders now, I think, and the chats are they're interesting, but it's always about driving driving engagement. But I think also as well, like you talk about sort of lone wolf recruitment, is a lonely business for founders and as well. So yeah, a lot do go into the communities. But yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't you apply that to? I was reading an article on LinkedIn the other day by Harriet Cox, who I used to work with previously, and she was at Microsoft doing marketing for 15 years, and she talked about making your customers fans. And actually, it really struck a chord with me around the and how do you move it just a transaction to being a fan. So I think about, football teams. How do you move that? It's not just don't just turn up, watch the game, and in my case, see the club lose. You actually go there, you speak to other fans, you moan about it, et cetera, et cetera. But you're a fan. I'm not going to change my team just because, even the results aren't great. So, and it's a similar thing with how can you get people bought into your brand? If someone's got a working career of 20, 30 years, how do you make sure that you're the first name that people come to when they're thinking about change or thinking about hiring?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. And I always try to emphasize this point when I'm speaking to business in terms of like, listen, you've got a good amount of candidates, you've got a good amount of jobs. The only thing that's sort of missing in between is creating that engagement piece, right? You want to increase the chances of a candidate responding to an email that they receive from your business. And I was also reading an article where it was talking around the talent shortage at the moment that we're facing is actually easing off. So we are starting to get, candidates who are available. However, the highly skilled candidates are the ones that remain in demand, but they're also the ones with the highest expectations, right? So they want a certain way of, being communicated to. They want to be communicated to within a certain time frame. And again, you can see back from that that graph here, sort of indicating again what the percentage of frequency candidates are expecting. And I have an example of why consistent communication, obviously at the right moments, is really important. So from Bullhorn's perspective, we have a community that we've built called the Automation User Group. So it's a free community, is open to both Bullhorn customers and Bullhorn clients. And it's essentially a safe space that we've created for business to come together, discuss, how they're using Bullhorn technology, where they found successes. We do have in-meeting meetups, and most of the time is virtual, but we do have in-person meetups as well. And on our last meeting, we gave the platform to our clients, existing clients, to come and talk about some of the automations that they've put in place with Bullhorn's automation engine and what results that's brought the business. And one of the examples, we had 4 key examples, and I'm happy to share them with you after the call. But for me, the example that stood out the most was a business who built a very simple automation to continue engaging candidates, whether they placed them or not. And what that basically led to was 78 placements or 78 extra placements over a 12-month period that they maybe some of their more senior consultants would have picked up, by reaching out to a candidate who accepted a job elsewhere and, checking in to see how that's going. But a lot of the time, you would not be doing that just because you're probably busy with other things once you know that you've missed out on the candidate. And those 78 placements, if I was to do the maths on average in terms of what's the average placement fee within the recruitment industry, that's over 400,000, whether that's pounds, euros, whatever sort of currency you want to work with. And that was just with just one simple automation. So hopefully that shows the effect that just a simple automation to consistently engage your candidates at the right times can easily bring back hundreds of thousands of, in revenue back to the business.
And also as well, it just runs. That's the other thing, it just runs. Mm-hmm. And you're creating that permanent conversation with people. And if we go back to our instances, imagine you bought something from Amazon or you took out a Tesco club card and they never contacted you. They never gave you offers. They never asked, they never sort of bothered with you again. You just think that was crazy. They've gone to this time. You go to all this trouble to attract, if you look at what people are paying for job boards, for LinkedIn, for their systems, yeah, it's huge amounts of money. The cost of access, and then to do nothing with it. So yeah, I fully agree with you, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we like we're also about sort of that practice what you preach, right? We're talking about, to customers about, hey, what's your engagement rates looking like? What, do you have any communities going on for your candidates? So we've taken that same approach and built that community for ourselves as a business. And now we've got a safe space where essentially clients are selling Bullhorn on our behalf. So again, you can have, as a recruitment business, your candidates selling your services on your behalf, just from creating that sort of safe space for them to, be part of the community, leave feedback on your website, or, engage in certain social posts, and other examples like that as well.
I agree. Super smart thing to do. And I've been to a couple of those automation events. One of them was virtual, and one of them was in your offices in Bishopsgate. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was really good to literally see like-minded people sharing experiences and actually on how they could improve their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Those were the key findings that I thought would be useful to discuss today. Again, there was tons more. Our grid report is open for everyone to access, but yeah, those are the key ones that I thought to pick up for today's call.
I guess, yeah, if you just want to take the screen share off. Yeah, so I think from my perspective, that's really interesting. And those are just a few of the things we picked out. I'd encourage anyone to go and register and read the report. There were a few other things that I saw on the report which were fascinating for me, that firms who had an AI strategy were significantly more likely to have grown. And also as well, those who were even experimenting with, again, were significantly. So you don't need, but having a strategy and an idea was that. And it was all about this year, relationships, winning new clients, strengthening, but still there were certain sectors that were still very much focused on candidate acquisition. So, it wasn't an industry by industry norm as well. So, really, thanks so much for your time. It's really good to sort of see, and I would say that a lot of this does sort of re-emphasize what we hear anecdotally, but it's really good to have it backed up with data. So we'll definitely look out for the next one as well, and see if everyone's adopting. Hopefully everyone will take your prompts today and go and build better businesses as a result.
Definitely. I appreciate you for having me on today. One last thing I'll leave for the listeners is, don't be afraid of AI, or all of these sort of tech advancements that you're seeing in the industry, because essentially if you're not in a position to embrace it, you unfortunately will get left behind. There's going to be things that recruitment businesses were doing 10 years ago that if someone was doing that today, you're thinking, why on earth are you doing it this way? So think in another 10 years, what we're going to be doing today, people are going to be looking like, why on earth are we doing it this way? So I think just having that open mind to just be curious and ask questions. You don't necessarily need to adopt it straight away, but just be curious, ask questions on, hey, how can this improve our candidates' experience, our clients' experience, our consultants' experience? And then I think that would be the beginning of you sort of understanding how it can benefit the business.
I agree. It's all about embracing it. And, I'd been in the industry since 99. So I was told that the internet would kill recruitment, that job boards would kill recruitment, that LinkedIn would kill recruitment. And actually, all that's happened is recruiters have used those tools and become even better. And they'll do exactly the same. The good ones will do exactly the same with AI. So yeah, but it's a really interesting. I do agree. It's an interesting observation that you need to
Yeah.
embrace it or get left behind. So, John, thanks so much for your time. Really good to catch up, and yeah, we'll catch up soon when after some of these automation events. And there's anything that you feel that you want to add, let us know, and we'll drop it into the notes.
Appreciate your time as well, Andy. It's been good catching up.
Take care. Cheers, John.
Nice one. Take care.